Hey guys, Will here, and today I've got a cordless job site radio from Milwaukee. I've owned this one for the last couple of years and it's been very reliable for both charging batteries for the Milwaukee power tools and playing music for larger open areas and bigger job sites too. If you want the long and short of it, this Milwaukee radio is easily the way to go if you already have quite a few Milwaukee power tools and want a radio that will run off your M18 batteries and also play pretty loud music while you're working. And if there's a power outlet near where you're working, it's got a power cord to plug the radio in, which will charge your M18 batteries. The radio works well when it's outside, but indoors the frequency for the radio struggles a bit and it doesn't pick up FM stations too well, which I thought was worth including. If you want a more detailed look at some of this radio's features, downfalls and good points, stick around for that. Starting off with the design, it weighs in at 8 kilos, so it's not light but super sturdy and more trustworthy to not be damaged like some of the other smaller cordless radios you get for around the worksite. It stands at 370 millimeters high and 305 mil wide, and it's wrapped in this sturdy, thick plastic in almost like a roll cage design with these metal handles. Definitely well suited for rough worksite conditions where any number of things could come down on top of it. There's a weather sealed compartment on top with a limited amount of space for personal items that you want to keep dry and safe. It's definitely harder to fit some of the newer, larger smartphones inside this though. These are the dimensions for the compartment. Mostly I just use this for standing my phone in. It does fit inside it, but it only goes in a certain way, which isn't ideal. And if you own a smaller phone, it definitely will fit in there okay. And if you have any smaller items that you need to be kept safe and dry, there's also an auxiliary cable inside the compartment, but a lot of smartphones are getting rid of that capability now. Also support for Bluetooth connection as well. So there's both those options there. I found that the auxiliary cable was good to plug into the phone, especially when I was working in an area that had a lot of obstacles, which would reduce the strength of the Bluetooth connection with my phone. So there's definitely some advantages to still having an auxiliary connection to your smartphone to play music and stream radio. There's a USB charging port next to that, which supports up to 2.1 amps of output, and so you can charge your phone or any other device, but if you try and connect anything that draws more than 2.1 amps, it'll set off a switch inside the radio that'll reset by itself. Features wise, you can save up to 10 radio stations into the onboard memory, but you do have to insert 2 batteries in order for the memory to work. It's simply hidden behind a door inside the weatherproof compartment with one screw that you undo with a Phillips head screwdriver, pop the cover off, insert the batteries and put it back on. And that'll make sure that the clock and radio stations are saved to the radio when there's no cordless battery plugged in or it's not plugged into an outlet. There's also a bottle opener on the side of the radio, which is great to have at the end of the day on or off site. There's also a Bluetooth range for this radio up to 30 feet according to Milwaukee, which is around about 9 meters. But depending on your smartphone, you can expect to get a little more than that. For example, I used my Samsung Note 9 to connect to the radio and tested how far I could walk away before it lost its signal. I got up to 60 meters away before it started to get really badly interrupted. But keep in mind that's with no obstacles or big barriers in between the radio and the phone. After putting a few large trees in between the radio and I though, I managed to get about 16 meters away before there was some connection issues. So still better than the 9 that Milwaukee states. Depending on how many obstacles there are around where you're working, you might be better off just plugging it into the auxiliary cable. And as I mentioned at the start, there is an inbuilt charger inside the radio, but you do have to have it plugged into an outlet. The charging time for your standard M18 batteries is about 30 minutes to an hour. There's some indicator lights on front of the radio that tell you how far along the charge is. It also flashes alternatively red and green if the battery's faulty, and I happen to have a bit of a dud battery laying around to show you what that looks like too. And if you do happen to be buying this radio without having previously owned any Milwaukee tools, I do recommend buying a battery just so you can use it as a cordless radio. To start off with, you can get your base type battery, which is a 2 amp hour for $100, but for an extra $50 you can get a 4 to 5 amp hour battery, which will last you 12 plus hours of listening on around medium volume. There's a 40 watt sound amplifier built into the radio with 2 larger speakers at the front and 2 smaller ones right above them. Here's a few clips to give you an idea of the kind of sound it produces. Sound wise, the mid-range is definitely respectable and it produces a nice rich full sound. You can also change how much bass and treble there is by pressing the EQ button and changing the different treble and bass levels. I found at max volume there was a little bit of distortion, but you're hardly ever going to be playing the radio that loudly unless you're trying to attract some complaints from the neighbours. I found using the radio outside a lot. I left the equalizer settings unchanged, but it's nice to know that those settings are there. If you work in different environments, you can change them accordingly. It has a waterproof rating of IP54, meaning it can handle general splashes of water, but definitely no pressure spray or being submerged. When it comes to battery life, you can run the radio on medium volume for 12 plus hours on one of the 4 or 5 amp hour batteries with no issues. It'll probably last even longer too if you use one of the higher capacity batteries. And if you're curious about what the battery level's sitting at, you can simply press the battery level indicator on the cordless battery and it'll let you know how many bars are left. Very similar to how you check how much power is left in your cordless tool. So far I've covered all the good parts about the radio, but as with any bit of tech, there is some downsides too. The first one being, as I mentioned at the start, the radio frequency. It does pick up FM stations when it's outside or if you're in an open plan shed, but if you're inside all the time, definitely wouldn't be using this as radio. I mainly used it with my phone, just streaming radio or Spotify, so it wasn't a big deal for me, but it might be a deal breaker for some. The other thing too is the power lead. I found that it's not quite long enough in some situations where you need to plug it into an outlet to charge your batteries. If they'd made it an extra meter and a half, it would have been perfect. You can see on the back of the radio there is some wire management hooks and it looks like there's enough space there to have them actually extend the lead, so it would have been nice if they made it a little bit longer. It's definitely not the most portable radio out there due to its weight and size, but if you're setting up at a worksite for the day or you have a shed and you've got the radio sitting in there, it's definitely probably not going to be moved all that often, so it's an ideal unit for that. It retails for $366 if you're in Australia, and over in the US, I'll put what the price is there too. All in all, this is a great worksite radio to keep your phone charged up and your cordless batteries charged throughout the day. It's definitely easy to recommend if you already own a number of Milwaukee tools and you're after a radio that will double as a battery charger. That's all from me. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave it a thumbs up and I'll be leaving a link to the worksite radio down in the description below. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.